you ever feel like your own children are starting to ignore you? Or worse, that they no longer respect you? You raised them with love and care, and now you're left wondering, where did I go wrong? It hurts, right? But let me tell you something important. Reacting with anger or falling into sadness won't solve the problem. Instead, there are wise steps you can take to regain peace, dignity, and even respect, all without creating conflict in today's video. I'm sharing 8 powerful actions you can start right now. These are proven, thoughtful approaches that many elderly parents have used to repair broken relationships, and they'll help you do the same. Let's dive in. Insight number 1. Don't react. Don't react in anger. In anger, pause and reflect. When we feel disrespected by the very people we raise, the pain cuts deep. It's natural to want to lash out. To say, how could you treat me like this after everything I've done for you? But before you let your emotions take over, take a moment to pause and reflect, because reacting out of anger often pushes your children further away, making the situation worse. Take the story of Mr. Tanaka, a retired school teacher in his 70s. His children rarely visited him, and when they did, they barely spoke to him. One day, after yet another phone call went unanswered, he felt his frustration boil over. He wanted to call his son and shout, "Do you even care about me anymore?" But instead, he stopped himself. He decided to take a quiet walk in the park near his home. As he walked, memories of his life flooded in his years as a dedicated teacher. The sacrifices he made for his family and the moments of joy he shared with his children. When they were young, he realized that his worth wasn't tied to whether or not his children called him. His value came from the life he had built and the kindness he had shown to others. That moment of calm reflection helped him see that his dignity wasn't something his children could take away, no matter how distant they became. This story teaches an important lesson. Emotional reactions rarely lead to positive outcomes. When you lash out, you don't gain respect. You lose it instead. Pause. Take a moment to breathe. Reflect and remind yourself of your own value. By doing this, you approach the situation with a clearer mind and a stronger sense of self-worth, which often leads to better communication and, in time, a restored relationship. Remember, dignity is something you carry within yourself. It doesn't come from others. Approval, calm reflection will always bring more clarity than anger ever will. Insight: rebuild your own life. Number 2, rebuild your own life. Find new purpose. One of the most powerful things you can do when you feel ignored by your children is to shift your focus back to yourself instead of waiting for their attention or validation. Start rebuilding your own life by finding a new purpose. When you live a fulfilled life, your energy changes, and that change doesn't go unnoticed. A parent who radiates joy, confidence, and independence becomes much harder to ignore. Take the story of Mrs. Elena, a widow in her late 60s after her husband passed away. Her children visited less often, the calls became shorter, and eventually they stopped altogether. At first, she felt devastated. She spent days sitting by the phone waiting for it to ring. But one morning she decided she'd had enough. She picked up a packet of seeds from her cupboard and went out to her garden. At first it was just a small hobby, planting flowers and tending to her vegetables, but soon gardening became her passion. She joined a local gardening club, met new friends, and even started sharing her produce with neighbors. Elena's energy changed. She was happier, more active, and more connected to her community. One day, her daughter called out of the blue, "Mom, I've been thinking about you lately. You sound so happy these days. What's your secret?" That phone call led to more visits and deeper conversations. Eleanor's new sense of purpose reignited her children's admiration for her. They saw her not as someone waiting for their attention, but as someone living a rich, meaningful life. The key lesson here is simple. A fulfilled parent is harder to ignore when your life has purpose. People are naturally drawn to you, including your children. So instead of waiting for them to come back into your life, start investing in yourself. Pursue hobbies, join local groups, or volunteer in your community. The happiness you find within yourself will not only bring you peace, but it might just bring your children back too. Insight number 3. Communicate your feelings. Wisely communicate your feelings wisely when your children seem distant or disrespectful. It's tempting to confront them with frustration. You may want to say, "Why don't you ever call me? Don't you care about me anymore?" But harsh words often lead to defensiveness and more distance. Instead, the key is to communicate your feelings in a way that invites connection rather than conflict. A gentle, heartfelt approach works better than blame or guilt. Let's take the story of Mr. Peterson, a retired carpenter who hadn't heard from his son James in months. Every day, Mr. Peterson would sit by the window, hoping to see his son pull into the driveway. The silence hurt him deeply, and he often thought about calling James to demand answers. But instead of letting his frustration take over, he chose a different path. He sat down at his kitchen table and wrote a letter. In the letter he shared his feelings without blame. He wrote James, "I've been thinking about you a lot lately. I miss our conversations. I miss hearing about your life. I just want you to know that I'm always here, and I'm proud of you no matter what." A few days later, his phone rang. It was James. The letter had touched him deeply. He confessed that he'd been busy with work and family, but he hadn't realized how much his father missed him. That one letter led to regular phone calls and weekend visits that hadn't happened in years. The key lesson here is to communicate wisely instead of blaming your children for their absence. Express your emotions. Gently use phrases like, "I miss our time together," or "I've been thinking about you," rather than saying, "You never call me." Words have the power to heal or hurt. And when you choose your words with care, you open the door to understanding and reconnection. Insight number 4. Set healthy boundaries. Healthy boundaries. Respect is a two-way street. As much as you want your children to respect you, you also need to respect yourself by setting healthy boundaries. When you allow disrespect to continue unchecked, it sends a message that you're willing to tolerate hurtful behavior. But when you stand up for your own well-being, you not only protect your peace of mind, you also teach others how to treat you. Consider the story of Mrs. Rosa, a retired nurse in her 70s. Her son Daniel had grown increasingly demanding over the years. He rarely visited, unless he needed money help with his children, or someone to vent his frustrations to. Mrs. Rosa always dropped everything to help, hoping it would make him appreciate her more. But Daniel's demands became unreasonable. He would show up unannounced, expecting her to babysit for hours without asking, and never once said thank you. One day, after yet another last-minute request, Mrs. Rosa decided she had had enough. Instead of agreeing, she gently but firmly said, "Daniel, I love you, but I'm not available today. I've made plans for myself." At first, Daniel was surprised, even annoyed. But Mrs. Rosa stayed consistent. She stopped catering to unreasonable demands and focused on her own well-being. She joined a local book club, started attending yoga classes, and reconnected with old friends over time. Daniel began to notice the change he saw, that his mother was no longer waiting around for his calls or bending over backward to meet his every request. He started treating her with more respect, realizing that his behavior had been selfish by setting boundaries. Mrs. Rosa regained her dignity, and her relationship with her son improved. The key lesson is simple. Respect must go both ways. You deserve to be treated with kindness and consideration, but that starts with how you treat yourself. Setting boundaries doesn't mean pushing your children away. It means valuing your own time, energy, and emotional health. When you respect yourself, others are more likely to follow your lead. Insight number 5. Led by example. By example, it's easy to expect respect from others, but the truth is, respect must be earned, and often it's earned through our own actions. If you want your children to treat you with respect, start by showing them what that looks like, how you speak, act, and treat others. Including your children can have a powerful influence on their behavior. When you lead by example, you quietly teach those around you how to act in return. Take the story of Mr. Lorenzo, a retired factory worker and grandfather of 5. As he grew older, he noticed that his adult children visited less and less. When they did visit, they often seemed feeling pressured or obligated. Insight. Forgive but don't forget your worth. Number 7. Forgive but don't forget your worth when your children hurt you by ignoring or disrespecting you. Forgiveness can be one of the hardest yet most powerful things you can offer. Carrying resentment only weighs you down. Forgiveness helps you heal and move forward with peace in your heart. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting your own worth. You can forgive your children for their actions without allowing that disrespect to define your value. Let me share the story of Mrs. Evelyn, a retired artist and mother of 2. Her daughter Claire had grown distant over the years. Rarely calling or visiting, Evelyn felt hurt and abandoned, wondering if she had done something wrong for a long time. She carried that pain, feeling as though she wasn't important anymore. One day, Evelyn decided it was time to let go of the anger. She wrote Keller a letter saying, "I forgive you for the distance between us, and I'll always love you." But she also made a quiet decision to reclaim her dignity. Instead of waiting by the phone, she picked up her paintbrushes and began painting again, something she hadn't done in years. She joined the local art group, displayed her work at community events, and found joy in pursuing her passions once more. Months later, Claire visited unexpectedly. She was surprised to see her mother so happy and fulfilled. "Mum, you've been painting again." "Why didn't you tell me?" Claire asked, visibly moved by her mother's work. Evelyn simply smiled and said, "I've been focusing on what brings me joy." That visit marked a turning point in their relationship. CLA began visiting more often, not out of guilt, but out of admiration for her mother's quiet strength and independence. The key lesson here is this: forgiveness is a gift you give yourself, but it doesn't mean shrinking your value. You deserve to be treated with respect, no matter what. Forgive the past, but never let anyone's neglect or hurtful behavior make you forget your own worth. Pursue your passions, live with dignity, and remember, your value comes from within, not from how others treat you. Build a new circle of companionship. Insight number 8. Build a new circle of companionship. Loneliness can be one of the most painful consequences of feeling ignored or disrespected by your children. When you have no one else to turn to, you may start to depend on your children for emotional support, hoping they'll fill the void. But emotional dependence can lead to frustration and resentment, especially if they don't meet your needs. That's why it's essential to build a new circle of companionship by cultivating relationships with others, friends, neighbors, or even members of a community group. You can reduce the sting of neglect and create a rich, fulfilling social life. Take the story of Mr. Harold, a widowed man in his 80s. For years, he relied on his son and daughter to provide companionship and emotional support. But as they became busier with their own lives, his visits grew shorter and less frequent. He felt isolated, spending most days alone in his home. But one day, after a particularly long week of solitude, Harold decided to join a local seniors club. He wasn't sure what to expect, but he felt a spark of hope. To his surprise, he quickly made new friends. There was a weekly coffee gathering at the clubhouse, a monthly book club, and even a group that went for walks in the park. Harold was soon looking forward to his social activities, and his circle of friends became a lifeline. He shared laughs, stories, and even created a small group of close friends with whom he went on day trips. Slowly, he stopped relying on his children for his emotional fulfillment. He still loved them and missed their visits, but he no longer felt the same sense of emptiness when they were busy. The key lesson here is clear. Loneliness leads to emotional dependence, but a vibrant social life can fill the gap by building new relationships. You free yourself from expecting everything from your children. You open yourself up to new sources of joy, support, and companionship. This not only improves your emotional well-being, but it also makes you less reliant on your children, reducing any feelings of resentment and allowing your relationship with them to flourish in a healthier way. Conclusion. In the end, navigating the complexities of relationships with our children as we age is challenging, but it's entirely possible to regain peace, dignity, and respect by following these 8 insights, from pausing to reflect instead of reacting in anger to setting healthy boundaries and leading by example. You can rebuild stronger, healthier connections with your children while still honoring your own needs and worth. Thank you for watching. If you found these insights helpful, I'd love to hear from you. Comment below with a 9 if you're ready to embrace these steps in your life, or a 0 if you're just starting to reflect on these changes. Take care, and remember, your worth is timeless.